This episode of A Conversation with John Conenna is sponsored by Generate. In today's digital age, staying ahead means harnessing the power of generative AI. Wondering how your small or medium-sized business can join this revolution? Look no further than Generate, your strategic partner for integrating cutting-edge generative AI solutions. We create personalized plans, adapting existing AI technologies to fit your specific business needs. Plus, our expert team provides essential training, empowering you to make the most of these innovative technologies. Interested in transforming your business with AI? Reach out to us at generateteam@gmail.com. That's generate, GENERAIT, team@gmail.com. And now, on with the episode.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Today we go down a different path, a path that I've always been interested in since the days of my father. Today we are going to be speaking to Paul Jarzombek, the president and CEO of LR International Incorporated. LR International is a full-service freight forwarding company with capabilities of handling shipments all over the world. I have known this gentleman probably now for probably as long as he's been around at LR International, but the history of this man goes back a little bit further. Paul, good morning, welcome, and what is going on with you, young man?
Good morning. I appreciate being here. As you said, we've known each other for a long time, so it's nice to finally find myself on the popular podcast there. So I'm happy to do it. Yeah, nothing too crazy other than the shipping world always keeps us on our toes.
For sure, and it seems like every time I talk to you, our two businesses kind of go hand in hand, how our economy goes. Paul, how does it get started for you? Because when I was doing some of the research on you, it starts way before LR International, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, you know my cousins, Rick and Linda France.
Yes.
So they were, our industry is really the historically known as the freight forwarding industry. Today it has a lot of sort of different names, third-party logistics and supply chain management, and those are really all the same thing from 30 or 40 years ago. They've just changed names. So back when I was in college, I was looking for an internship, and my cousins who were in the industry knew of a company that was looking for a summer intern. And I did that my junior year of college. And then in my senior year, I had a different internship, totally different industry. And that company that I had interned for was going to be hiring someone in the sales team that fall. And so they contacted me and said, "You did a good job as an intern. Would you be interested?" And I, of course, as a very poor college student, I said yes, because I would have said yes to probably any job that was offered at that time.
Sure.
Not really knowing, frankly, that much about the industry. This happens with people, right? You just kind of, you sort of fall into something. And I didn't know much about the industry, got into it. And, for whatever reason, I'm not the brightest, sharpest knife in the drawer, as they say, but this industry really clicked for me, and I understood, the process. And so that's how it started really for me when I was in college.
And Paul, it was with this Dutch-French conglomerate.
Yeah. Van Ameren Citico was the name of the company, based in the Netherlands, and they were diverse, pretty big company. They had some different businesses, but one of their main businesses was transporting things in bulk, primarily bulk chemicals. And so they had their own fleet of tanker ships that they would move around the world, but certainly within Europe. And a lot of their customers were petrochemical companies that were moving chemicals in large quantities, right, as opposed to packaged in drums or whatever. So that was their main business at that time.
How long were you with them for that start?
I was there. Just under 4 years. It was like 3.5 years. And what happened there was my boss at the time was recruited by a Japanese company to start a Midwest office. They didn't have one, and so they said, well, Chicago's a good spot because of the airport and the rail system, and
Right.
so they recruited him to start that office, and he recruited me to be the operations manager for that operation. So I went from the Dutch company to a Japanese company at that time.
And at that time, are we talking about Hitachi?
We are, yeah, Hitachi, the transport group for the global manufacturer that makes TVs and cranes and whatever else.
So you were getting now tell me if I'm wrong, this diversification. You were diversified. I mean, you were going from this one company now to this, so everything was going in a different direction. Was it a big adjustment to go to Hitachi, Paul?
It was, in a couple of ways. I mean, I had worked for a European company, and the types of business that they handled were somewhat specialized, right? And then when I went to Hitachi, Hitachi at that time had, I don't know, 100,000 employees and 40,000 different products or something like that, all sorts of, consumer electronics and construction and automotive and whatnot. So that was actually an extremely important time for me in my career, because not only was I working with different products, I up to that point, my experience had been really almost entirely export from the United States to other countries. And really, my focus in the first job I had was Australia, New Zealand.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was really, I dabbled in some other lanes, but that kept me pretty busy. When I went to Hitachi, first of all, the world expanded for me because I was involved in some other markets, and certainly heavily involved with Japan, both inbound and outbound, and I got some import experience. So at Hitachi, I actually, back in the day, I had an airport ID, and I used to go to the airport, and you could actually walk around and pick up import documents at these different airlines. And the plane would be like right over there. I mean,
Oh
like
my
you could
God.
literally walk up to the plane. That'll never happen today, but it was that was an education for me. Every day I went to the airport, put on my ID, walked around, and picked up the import documents, which was really it was actually a really good experience for me.
And Paul, thank you for bringing that up that way, because I remember back in the day when I could write a ticket for you, and if I said, "Hey, Paul, you want to go to Hawaii tomorrow? Here's my ticket," no one checked anything, so I what
Yeah.
oh, that's Paul Jarzombek. Let him in. Wow.
Today
I
you'd
gotta
get
ask you.
tackled.
Yeah, right. Oh my God! Now our belts are on the runway. God.
Yeah.
Um, I have to ask you. We're using two words here, and I want our audience to know that word export. You're dealing with international stuff. I mean, different. Am I right to say different laws, different agendas? You have to be on top of things, because I see this just in your resume alone of some of the councils you're on and some of the groups you've been with. Dealing with international, this is not a piece of cake, especially nowadays, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the shipping industry is a big industry, and there's some people who spend their entire career involved in shipping things around the United States or around North America. And that's a really big market, and you can actually spend your entire career doing that. Mine has been, as you said, more on the international side. So both export and import, dealing with, 6 continents, virtually every country around the world that trades, with the United States, with the exception of those that are sanctioned. And yeah, every one of, I get this question all the time. People say to me, why isn't there just one set of documents for anywhere we export to, everywhere? Why doesn't the whole world just get together and agree on this? I said, boy, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the whole world doesn't agree. And so,
exactly.
unfortunately, you don't, and you probably know this in your business too. Some places you need a visa, some places you don't. The inoculations or vaccines are different, depending on the situation. So same thing with freight. We got a different situation, in most areas of the world. There are some, like in Europe, the European Union has sort of gotten together and said, okay, all the European Union countries will pretty much require this,
Sure.
and so there are some trading blocks, but it's definitely a every day is a little different depending on the area of the world that we're interacting with.
And I got to tell you, Paul, and thanks for bringing up that kind of correlating back to me a little bit. I know every day when I know someone, oh, you're going to Bangkok or you're going here, or even now some of these things that are becoming in 2025 where we'll need a visa now to go to Europe, like an e-visa.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that just, why can't it just be one simple, here's your passport, move on. So I got to move on now to 1994 a little bit because this experience that you had, and of course we talk about Rick Franz and we talk about Linda. How do you now get hooked up with finally, this family business that you knew of, and of course they knew of your experience, and basically pick up the Shohei Ohtani of the day, Paul Jarzombek? How does that work out?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I mean, we still kind of joke about it today. My cousin Linda and I wonder to myself if it was always their intention for us to kind of come together. It wasn't. We didn't really discuss that right off the bat when they introduced me to the European company that I worked with or had the internship with. But you got to wonder if maybe their wheels were turning. But the interesting part about that is when I first got into the industry, the Dutch company that I worked for, my cousin's freight forwarding business that they had started in 1988 was actually a customer of the Dutch company that I worked for. So there's a thing in our industry called co-loading, and it's sort of similar in your industry when airlines have these groups that you can interchange. You have like American and British have like a code share agreement, and this it's similar to that.
Sure.
And what it really means is if you're in our business and you're shipping something to, let's say, Germany, and maybe you don't have a lot of customers or freight that goes to Germany, you can what we call co-load with another company that does have a lot of freight going to Germany. It makes the service better because, as you know, with passengers, when flights are full or ships are full, they tend to meet their schedules a little bit better because there aren't delays with people who are trying to fly last minute, or in the case of freight, they plan out their load and then they go. And carriers are always happiest when they're full. And so co-loading is something that's happened in our industry since way back in when the Dutch and Chinese essentially invented shipping. It meant one party's helping the other to kind of get the cargo to where it needs to go. So my cousin's company, which is LR International, which is now my company, as it turns out, but my cousin's company at the time co-loaded with the company that I was working with, the European company, to places like Western Europe and definitely to Australia and New Zealand, because the company was really strong in those lanes. And those are the lanes that I worked in.
Right.
So weirdly enough, my cousins were my customers when I first started in the industry. And what was interesting about that is I got to know their customers because they were booking with me to move cargo to some of these places. And so I got to know their customers, And so then when I moved to the Japanese company, I sat with my cousins and said, what do you think? Should I do this? I was just getting married. I was kind of worried about it. And they said, look, you've probably done as much as you can do at that European company. This is a really good opportunity to leapfrog into a position with more responsibility. And you're going to be in over your head a little bit, but that's the best way to learn. And they were 1,000% right. I got into the Japanese company and really learned a lot. I mean, the information was just,
a lot of different things were coming at you now. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, at the Japanese company, they were also a customer of mine, because at the Japanese company, we were really strong to Japan.
Sure.
And so if they had Japanese cargo for customers, they could co-load with us again. And, and then we moved it to Japan in conjunction with them. And so I was working with their customers and with them at both companies. And then, as you said, in 1994, we kind of said, hey, what if we join forces here? They had some really good customers. I had developed some good customers. Their expertise was primarily on the air freight side of the business, and mine was primarily on the ocean freight side of the business. Right. So, and that's just because of, the types of cargo we worked with and customers and all that. So it was a good way to come together because any deficits I had in air freight, they could help me cover, and any deficits they had in ocean freight, same thing. And so I took about a year. We talked about it for about a year. And again, another big decision for a young guy with a young family, basically.
Well, big one, yeah.
And, big decision for them too. I mean, to that point, they had themselves and a couple of employees. And, here comes this guy with a family and, a lot of responsibility. And I know we've talked about it in the past. They were secretly, of course, worried about making sure the whole thing would go well. And of course it did.
Yes.
And, it's about, what am I now, 30 some odd years later.
I want to say 34, right? At least 34 years.
Well, yeah, and 30 years at LR because it was 1994, that I started.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, 30 years later, I would say it worked out okay. But at the time, we were a little nervous. So that's how it happened.
No, but I mean, what a step ahead. How long was LR in business? I mean, I remember meeting Rick right around that time you came. I met Rick Franz.
Yeah, about 6 years. They had been running for about 6 years at that point. Okay. So, it was growing. I mean, they're definitely, but it was one of these things where, they were taking a chance on bringing on somebody who, I eventually became a partner. I wasn't at that time, but I eventually was. And, with that kind of thing, I mean, you say to yourself, will you get along? Will you agree on, various things? And sometimes those things don't work out. And then you get a little afraid to take that step. But, we all did it and it worked.
We use the word chance here today. Okay, yeah, maybe they took a chance on you, but I got to ask you something. You had that confidence because of your experience. Did you see where now you could come to an LR International, which you've done because I see it with you every day? Did you see that opportunity where it says, you know what, I can take this to another level? Paul Jarzombek can take this to another level. Did you see that about yourself?
So yeah, I mean, when I worked for the Japanese, and I'll tell you what, it's a great company. They're good to their people. I mean, it was a really good experience. But what I figured out, at least at that time, things may have changed a little bit, but at that time, working for a Japanese company, you pretty much were only going to achieve a certain level of advancement. Because especially at that time, the Japanese wanted Japanese people, nationals, really in the very senior management roles. And so looking ahead with that company, I knew that there was going to be a ceiling or a point where I wouldn't really go any further. And what I thought about with my cousins was, here's an entrepreneurial opportunity where pretty much the sky's the limit. I mean, we could take it, as hard and as fast and as far as probably our energy and our smarts and maybe even luck, would take us. And so I guess I was a little more attracted to the idea that we could develop it without having to get some sort of blessing from Tokyo or somewhere like that, and that was attractive to me. So yeah, it was a little bit of a chance or a risk, but I felt like the likely reward long-term was better. I think I was right based on 30 years later here, but at the time, of course, that's why it took a year. I didn't just immediately, we talked about it for quite some time, before we did it.
Before you were going to make this move. And here's another thing. Of course, the people in this industry, what's beautiful about this is the people in the industry already knew a Paul Jarzombek, and the people in the industry already knew the LR International with the Franzes. They saw that this could, I feel the outsider looking in, they saw that this could be a good mix. Did you feel the respect when you went there?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and again, I brought a slightly different skill set. They had, so, in our business, we talk about vendors, but we have three parties that we interact with. It's customers, vendors, and then what we call agents. Agents are companies like ours that represent us around the world, and we represent them here. Vendors are anybody that carries freight. Could be an airline, a trucking company, a steamship line that owns ships, that sort of thing. And then, of course, customers, people who want to use our service. And they had a strong vendor base on the air freight side, and I had a really strong vendor base on the ocean freight side.
Right.
So I brought some new contacts, both in vendors and in agents around the world. I remember when we first got together, I had such a strong relationship with the agents that we had in Australia and New Zealand from when I worked for the European company. I brought those agents to LR, and they represented us in Australia and New Zealand because of my experience back in my first job, with those companies. So we kind of all brought things, to the table. My cousin Rick was phenomenal in sales and marketing. My cousin Linda was, our financial controller, the CFO, and kind of watched all those kinds of things. And then my responsibility was the operations, the daily running of the business, the profit and loss, and what vendor are we going to use for this, and that sort of thing. So really, it was like a three-legged stool there, and it worked pretty well.
Yeah, everybody had their own thing going on.
Their own area.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I mean, just looking at what you had sent me, I mean, and of course, outside of LR, how you're well respected here, board of directors of the Southwest Illinois Trade Council, the member of the Illinois District Export Council and that's a federal appointee, which is fantastic. You are a two-time winner of the President's E Award for Excellence in Export Services for LR International there, a two-time winner of the Governor Award here in Illinois. So, Paul, you have really, the experience just shows in the resume. I got to go back to something too, from your beginnings to now. What is still to this day, when we talk about 2024 from those beginnings, what is that Paul Jarzombek, what's that, his main thing that he does still to this day that really brings it to the table for his company now to see? What do you expect from the rest of them that work for you?
Well, I guess to me it's a somewhat simple recipe. Things in the world and even in business have gotten a little complicated in the last maybe decade or two, and I'm not sure they absolutely need to. I tell people all the time, be the hardest working person in the room. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Be the hardest working person in the room. Now, if you happen to be the smartest person and the hardest working, you're going to do pretty well. I mean, that's like a grand slam. But be the hardest working person. That you can certainly control. And what I really mean by that is, I mean, really give your full effort, every day. Go above and beyond what's required.
Right.
And I would say when you do that, you're more often than not going to be successful. I mean, our business is, kind of like yours. It's a game of inches. Different things can happen. Flights can get canceled. I mean, look at what's happened in the last couple of days to you. A couple computers go out and poof, the whole thing, it blows up. So, I mean, these things happen. But at the end of the day, I would say more often than not, if you're the hardest working person in the room, I tell my kids this all the time, you're going to probably do okay. You're going to land on your feet. So that's really all I've done. I've gotten up it's no big secret here. I've gotten up every day and given my very best effort. I would say, as often as possible. Probably have a few days where I'm a little off, but generally speaking, that's what I try to do. I don't claim to be the smartest. I just try to work the hard. I basically just try to outwork the competition is what I basically try to do.
Right, by staying on top of it every day, and that which you have since your beginnings, and now being the president and CEO of LR. I got to ask you this question: both of our industries, of course, the word change is, of course, that's the biggest word in our industry. Have the changes, Paul, over the years, a man of your experience in this industry, have the changes been for the better since that incept, or has it where you say, wow, what's going on here now?
Some of it's been for the better and some of it hasn't, basically. I would say the process of not only moving cargo around the world, but tracking it, reacting when there's a problem, which invariably there is a lot of the time. Those kinds of things, technology has helped um, provide greater visibility faster, and the ability to react to problems and solve problems quicker. And so some of those changes in our industry, which are largely technology driven, I would say have been beneficial. I would say, there's some security changes that have occurred that are okay because the world has changed to some degree in the last 50 years,
Right.
and those changes are probably needed, so it's okay. The parts that aren't real great have really to do with how those tools and technology are used, and have actually in some ways replaced the interpersonal part of
Got
our
it.
business. When I first got in our business, I spent all day, every day on the phone, talking to people. What about this booking? Okay, change this, do that, and basically, if you wanted to do well, you had to figure out how to, there was a book many years ago, how to win friends and influence people,
Sure.
and essentially you had to do that every day. You'd get a hold of somebody, you'd say, how's your day going? Oh, it's going crummy, and you'd have to find something, some common denominator. Maybe you're talking about the Hawks or the Cubs or the
Right.
Sox, whatever it is. You got to find something so that basically you could get through their attitude. Maybe they're having a bad day or something, get to the business and get them to help you. My cousin Rick always used to say the most important thing you can do in business is to get people to like you, because if they like you, they're going to want to help you. And if they help you, you're going to be one step above maybe the person over here that they
Right.
didn't help because they didn't like them. So his philosophy was try to get everybody to like you if possible, And we did a lot of that. We did it on the phone. It was a lot about relationships. Today the relational aspect is, it's much more difficult, right? I mean, there's just a whole bunch of ways you can get stiff-armed electronically and through IT and all that, and it's just harder. When you would go to somebody, hey Bob, I'm having trouble with this shipment,
Sure.
can you help me? This person could actually influence it and help you. Now what do? You send an email to some dark hole and who knows what happens, so
Exactly.
that part hasn't been good.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you for bringing that up too, because now everybody. Sometimes I get so frustrated. I want to talk to Paul Jarzombek. I don't want this staring me in the face. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, John. I'll get back to you later. Or I'm on the phone right now. I'm busy. I'll get something like that comes up on the phone, and you're like, oh my God, this is getting crazy. I just want to ask you another question before I kind of play a little thing of 5 questions with you. Some are going to be fun questions, and of course, some are going to be dedicated toward you. I got to ask you this thing that we adapted on change. I have a friend of mine who has a pallet company in Elgin, and it's called Direct Pallet. His name is Tony Farinella. He's the president of that company, and I always try to go hand in hand with you. Everything is on those pallets, and everything is the responsibility of a Paul Jarzombek when it's going overseas. Like something like here, you got it all going on. All of a sudden, this thing gets to Baltimore and the roof caves in on the bridge. You've had those kind of episodes, correct?
Well, sure. I mean, just think of events over the last, 30 years. Anytime something sort of happens, there's probably in your business, a people aspect who are traveling, right?
Right.
I mean, you think of 9/11. I mean, all these people who were stranded wherever they were stranded because all the flights stopped, and it's the same with cargo. Something like, I don't know if you remember years ago, there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland, and it put all these particulates up in the atmosphere. And what actually happened for about a week, there were no flights from the United States going to Europe eastbound.
Right.
So you basically, if you wanted to fly something to Europe, you had to go the other way and basically go all the way around the earth in order to get to Europe, because they couldn't fly through these particulates. It would, crash the plane. So it was hilarious, because at the time we had all these customers that were like, why is my shipment going to take 10 days to fly from Chicago to Amsterdam? There's daily flights. I say, yeah, but a volcano erupted and the planes can't go through it or they're going to crash.
Yeah.
So what do you want me to do? It's just one of those things. So it's, yeah, I mean, world events, whether they're political, they could be environmental. Right now we've got these situations in the Middle East where ships are kind of being attacked, and carriers that have ships and vessels, they
Sure,
don't want to go in that route, so they're taking a different route, which is
sure.
adding 2-3 weeks to the arrival time on some of this cargo. It's amazing how some people hear these things in the news, but then they don't equate it really to what we're doing, and they say to themselves, well, why is my freight taking so long to go to the Middle East? Well, do you
Right.
know what's going on in the Middle East? I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, and that little, like yesterday, to close it on this time, somebody said to me, I told them about the computer situation of the last 5 days here, and they go, "Well, John, I mean, maybe it's time for a new computer." Well, just bought it at Best Buy 2 weeks ago. No.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Paul, though, that thank you for elaborating on that, because it just brings this, freight forwarding and your industry to light, and all the things that you've done. And this has been a tremendous, time. I can spend another hour with you getting a little bit more involved. We just dabbled on this, but this is fantastic because
Well, we say in our business, the way you really measure a company that does what we do, and I think it applies to what you do as well, John.
yes,
It's not so much when things go right; it's when they go wrong. When
right,
there's something wrong, or how do we do this differently? I got to be here this day instead of that day, or whatever it might be. Essentially, that's where a business like ours continues to be
right,
viable. Is we're able to solve those problems when things aren't perfect, and of course, we live in an imperfect world, so this happens a lot.
exactly,
So that
exactly.
that's really how we're measured. Is how do we react when things aren't perfect?
When we have, like you said, the Iceland or a Baltimore situation. Yeah,
Yeah,
now we have to, yeah, kind of the big word here, the millennial word. Now we have to pivot. My
yeah,
my
yeah.
son-in-law always says to me. All
That's
right,
right.
I got 5 questions for you.
Okay.
Answer them one word, a sentence, however you want to this day. On question one, who's that early mentor that you still talk about? I don't know if it was your parents or something, but that early mentor that when you get up in the morning and let's say we're having that bad day or we're having that good day, that early mentor that you still, wow, thank you for.
There's two for me. A personal mentor was my dad. My dad was he was an accountant. His whole life, deep thinker, just a great guy all the way around. And one of these, he was. You could take him at his word. He was a good guy. He was just so. My dad on the personal side. On the professional side, my two cousins, really, my cousin Rick and my cousin Linda. Kind of both of them, actually, not one over the
Yeah.
other. The influence of the two of them. Rick was. I always say Rick was kind of like the Babe Ruth of freight forwarding. I mean, he
Oh,
he was
wow.
he
What a,
was really he really knew the industry so well, and was very
oh,
well
for sure.
respected. And then my cousin Linda had the EQ side of she sort of brought the people skills and the caring that you have to take with your business, little details. So
Sure.
I'd say professionally those two.
Those two. We're gonna one of my last things. I want you to elaborate a little more. It would be one of my last things. I had a feeling it could be in my first question, but all right, let's go. Let's get a little bit more of a personal side of you. What is a Paul Jarzombek movie that he can watch 200 times and not get bored?
200 times a movie, huh?
Like you get off this podcast with me if you didn't have to go to LR. What's that go-to movie? One or two of them.
It's funny. I would say on the action side, I like those White House Has Fallen or London Has Fallen. Those sort of action, those kinds of movies. I think would be one of them. And really, quite frankly, on the rom com, kind of the gushy mushy side, there's a movie called The Lake House with Keanu Reeves, and that's a pretty good movie. So
Good.
I guess it depends on what mood I'm in. If I'm in a mood to see stuff blown up, I'll probably watch the London Has Fallen.
Right,
It
exactly.
depends.
Since I'm doing the interviewing today, and I really appreciate you coming on because your time's valuable and everything. Who's that person that, one or two of them, maybe just the one, that you would like to, I know you want to interview me. I know you do. But who's that person you'd like to interview in life that, you know, well, I want to, if it's a ball player, somebody in your industry, a woman, you know.
Yeah. Let's see. Person, I would say that it would be interesting. I wouldn't mind interviewing a former president and first lady. You could pick someone like George and Laura Bush, or even
Yeah.
Barack and Michelle Obama. But the reason that I think that would be interesting is it would be interesting to hear the different sides to that experience. The actual president's side, and then in the case of
Sure.
those two, the first lady side, um, and how they differ, in terms of the experience. And a lot of presidents and first ladies, or former presidents, first
Sure.
ladies, have been interviewed, and they've kind of gone through that thing. But I'd be interested to kind of ask some questions that probably don't get asked on the mainstream side of things, just to get a feel for what that life is actually like. So I'd probably pick somebody like that, I would say.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. Of course, you've been with LR since 94. Where do you see this going? What would you like to see where do you see LR in the next 10 years?
Well, I hope the company, first of all, I hope it outlives me. So
Yeah,
whatever age I live to, I hope it's still around, at that time. My plan, really, I've got a succession plan. We're a family business. So I would say most of the people that work with us are either family members or close friends.
right.
Fortunate to just, when we've needed somebody, they're just there. And it could be a family member, it could be a friend. So we have a lot of those. My brother-in-law works with me, and I actually have two brother-in-laws that work with me. But the one, Matt, is
Matthew
we
Hop,
worked
yeah.
together. Yeah, we worked together for a long time.
Another
Almost
great
20,
individual, and has taken that same steps with you, that work ethic.
almost 25 years, we've been together.
Jeez.
So, and then I have two sons that work in my business, my oldest son, Jackson, and then my youngest son, Harrison. And, the way I see this going is the succession plan would be that, my brother-in-law and potentially my two sons kind of take the business over from me. The one thing that I've learned here recently is you don't necessarily want to overstay your welcome. When my contributions aren't really relevant anymore,
Mhm.
it's probably time to step aside, get out of the way, and let some younger people push it forward,
Sure.
with their own ideas. And I would say that that's coming. It's probably in the next 10 to 12 years for me. And what I want to do is be relevant, and then get to a point where I can provide some advice or help to the people who are going to take it over, but really get out of their way. The
Right.
worst thing I think you can do is hang around until you're, old and feeble and be in the way. And I don't want to see that happen. So that's my plan. My plan is that my brother-in-law and my sons will take it over and keep it going. And they'll come to me and say, "What do you think about this?" And I'll give some advice, but the decision is theirs, because it's their business now. So
Right.
that's kind of my plan.
And I like the way you put it, because I know every day we could always use a new and young and fresh idea of how to keep moving this forward. And I know the Franz has left it in great hands with you in this direction that you put
Well,
it
they did the same thing. They also said, "Look, we don't want to be in the way.
in. Right.
We were going to give all of our contributions, all of our effort, everything we can, and then when we get to the point where we've done that, it's probably time to get out of the way and let the next generation." So I'm a second generation, owner of the business, and the goal is that the third generation will own the
Sure.
business, and I'll get out of the way. That's what I'm hoping
Exactly.
for. Yeah.
Well, this last one is a tribute to you, meaning this, and I have to say something after this. About in these last 6, 7 years, I know you've had a couple of hardships, meaning
Yeah.
your beautiful wife, wonderful wife, Tracy Jarzombek, and of course, losing Rick uh,
Yeah.
for and of course the years that I knew him too. I have to tell you, Paul, when I saw you every day, even after both of these situations, two people that meant the world to you. Your work ethic and everything was tremendous. Of course, losing your wife and losing Rick, just the emotion and the passion, but you've always been that even keel guy. I want to just say to you, I know what your wife meant to you, so we don't have to elaborate on that. That's not, but what did a Rick Franz, and including Linda in this, really here at the end, what did they mean to you? Now you are this president and CEO and keeping this alive.
Well, they meant everything. And I appreciate your comments. My wife as well. We kind of all did it together. My wife was right there with me. I mean, and we were, married at the time, and she was involved in our business for 30 years, just like I have been. So it is very difficult. I mean, I've done the best I can. Most of the time I'm faking it, to be perfectly frank about it. But sometimes you got to do that. The people around you need to continue to be inspired. And essentially, you can't fall apart for their sake, if nothing else. Rick and Linda both meant an awful lot to me. And I still have a very, very close relationship with Linda. As you said, Rick passed away from brain cancer, pretty sudden, obviously. And same with my wife. So these things happen. It's almost like a nuclear bomb dropping. You don't know it's coming. It's life changing. And it certainly has been. But at the end of the day, I felt a responsibility to the people that I work with, and frankly to myself, to keep carrying on. Rick and Linda taught me really everything I know in this industry, or pretty darn close. I mean, I certainly learned some things early in my career, but I mentioned they were a customer of mine. And while we were interacting, they were helping me. I was asking them questions kind of on the side, so I could look good to my boss, and I was saying, well, what does this mean? And what about this? And I just asked them questions, especially my cousin Linda. I would call her and ask her a dozen questions. She must have been so tired of hearing from me, but I was really just pushing for information, and they did it, and they never once complained about it. And certainly when we got together, I learned the finer points, not only of our industry, but of running a small business. And because you run a small business, John, there's just tons of small businesses out there. Just drive down the street sometime and look around. There's all these small businesses,
right?
Every one of them has, struggles, and it ain't easy to make payroll and to keep things going and to grow and to keep up with technology.
And every week to know that's, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, they taught me those things that were not industry specific, but were more, how do you run a successful small business and save for a rainy day and all these things. So I owe them a tremendous debt. And of course, my wife, the same. She put up with my, frustrations, and as most wives do. And she was just a great support. So I've had tremendous support from those people around me that have kind of helped me get to this point. No doubt about it.
I believe it. Well, I'm going to leave you at this. I truly appreciate you coming on this morning. And this, of course, gets out on our YouTube and Spotify channels here probably in the next couple of days. But I got to tell you, I know we talked about these three people and what they meant to you in your life, Tracy, Rick, and Linda, of course. But at the end of the day, they know they picked a winner when they picked you. And Paul Jarzombek, you keep doing what you're doing. This was tremendous. And Paul, really, for all these years I've known you, the 30 years I've known you, thank you for what you've done for me too.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, you are one of our more important vendors. I love working with you. And I think anybody who's listening to this should, really consider John and his business, Venus, for your either business or personal travel. I use them for both. If I'm going on vacation, we talk about it. We rent some tickets. He just does a fantastic job, and you'll never go wrong. It's just the highest level of service, your top level service. So I really appreciate that from you, John. And the next time I come on, we got to talk local Chicago sports, because I know you're an expert.
Don't mention that South Side team. I don't know. There must be. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah, I don't watch them.
Paul, have a great day, and truly thank you. Thank you.
Okay, buddy. Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll talk soon, Paul.
Yeah, sounds good.
On sale now at Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble stores. The Twins, A Journey of a Lifetime. The brothers and authors Tony and Carl Ruzicka take us through a journey of Chicago sports history and their memories of a bygone era. Purchase your copy today.